Speaking of wars, we have a war that seems to be, for now, concluding in the Middle East. And I think if you're a humanist, if you're a peace-loving person, that is a good thing. Less people dying, good thing. This week, we have an Israel and Gaza ceasefire. We have a hostage swap architected by, from all accounts, by two Americans, Steve Witkoff and our old friend, Jared Kushner. Jared's back in the mix, man. And there's some interesting analysis of Mr. Kushner's role in all of this, right? Much was made of, he said in the first Trump administration, I read 25 books on the Middle East, and so I could architect peace there. I think I could get it done. People laughed at him, Ben, but maybe do we need to give Jared his flowers?
Yeah, I think, listen, this raises a larger question, right, of things we talked about, of like, do you have experts? Do you want deep expertise? Do you want these generalists? And so I'm sure the quote is maybe out of context, or even if not, is not the complete context of how much he knows about this issue. I bet you that the team, we read the headlines like everything, right? Nothing is good or bad, right? We read the headlines and we're like, it's just these two dudes. And then I think there's probably a lot of people on these teams that we're not reading about, right? Admiral Brad Cooper, right? The CENTCOM commander. There's like the Morgan Ortagus, who's been with the Trump team in the first State Department, has a bunch of private sector experience in global affairs at EY, and a bunch of other, I'm totally glossing over a bunch of international experience. There's like, we've heard about some of the handoff from the detailed Biden team on this issue from like Brett McGurk, I think is his name, who was the NSC advisor, right? And did some back channel work with Witkoff. And so like, these things are really, really detailed. And like the principles are really important. And I think it's clear that their expertise at being generalists, so their generalist skills at negotiation were influential in this. But also, I'm just sure I've glossed over 20 or 30 people that probably had, very influential role in making the details matter here, which are important. You still need the principals who lead the negotiation. But I think this is not either an expert nor the kind of generalist. I think it's both. And a good team has both. So building a team, as you think about it, build a diverse team of experts and generalists.
Yeah, I think the part that is unequivocally true is that people make deals. Facts don't make deals. And so just putting out interesting facts, just knowing the history of a region alone is not sufficient to get the deal across the line. I think we've seen that time, like pure technocrats often can't get a deal to the finish line. They can work out, 80%, but then it takes that political will to get that final 20%, get to the finish line. I think what you see with Kushner, Jack Altman has an interesting take here. He comes in with one of Tech's favorite things right now, which is high agency. High agency explains this. Altman says, you can learn new things and work hard to solve tough problems, no matter how complicated. But also the fact that, one, he has a lot of relationships in the region, business relationships, personal relationships, a history that did not start the day he showed up to negotiate a deal. There was some amount of trust, some amount of at least understanding, if not actual goodwill and feelings behind these folks. And the other thing that changed here, it's very clear, is that there was a shifting calculus in the region on behalf of Israel, on behalf of Qatar and Egypt and Turkey, and frankly, ultimately on behalf of Hamas. And so all of these things come together to make, peace, make a deal possible. And I think what is cool about this is seeing the role. It should give a lot of folks, Ben, it gives me hope, right? I'm not an expert. I'm not a specialist. Generalists have a role to play because there's always a human element to these things. And I think you're absolutely right. On the flip side, I remember when they were negotiating Iran's nuclear program, Steve Witkoff took a lot of flack from people who, again, oversimplified and said, what does Steve Witkoff know about nuclear weapons? How is he going to negotiate the intricacies of these things? I think your point there is true as well. Of course, there's got to be people behind the scenes preparing the landscape, sharing ideas, doing some of that hard work around the details so that these principles can come in and close it off. So speaking of closing off, we'll end that one.